Welcome to the Keeping the Nostalgia Alive show. I am your host, Billy Powell. As you can see with us today is Jerry Sichting. And if I went on and on and on about the list of stuff that he's done, been with, accomplished, team efforts, championships, awards, I wouldn't have time for the interview. So, Jerry, thank you so much for spending some time with us on Keeping the Nostalgia Alive show. And I appreciate you being a guest.
It's my pleasure, Bill. Glad to be here.
And what's very interesting about Jerry's visit is I kind of do 6 degrees of separation. Our first kind of introduction to each other was Jerry was trying to find a picture that he had taken with Coach John Wooden, who both Coach Wooden and Jerry went to Martinsville High School. And I found that photo for him. But Jerry, tell me a little bit about that photo.
Well, that photo, it was taken either in 76 or 77, I believe. Coach Wooden had retired. His last year was 1975, went out on top, winning his 10th NCAA championship in 12 years, I believe. And so he had retired and he'd gotten into broadcasting a little bit. He really didn't get heavily involved or do every weekend or stuff like that. But he came to Purdue to do a game of the week at Mackey Arena. So it had been that was probably my sophomore year, I believe, when that photo was taken before the game. I had my warm-up top on. And the funny story about that, Coach Wooden always liked to walk. That was his exercise when he was older. They talked about him walking around the UCLA track around the football field and stuff on their athletic fields. And so he had taken a long walk, and he was in my fraternity. I was in a fraternity for a couple of years, and he came over to the house that morning. I'd already left to go to the game, or I might have even stayed in the week. They put us in a hotel a lot of times the night before the game, so I wasn't there. I don't think he came over, and I don't even think he knew I was in that fraternity, to tell you the truth. So he came over, and actually it was early in the morning. I think it was a Saturday, so most of the guys have been up half the night, and he walked all the way up through the top floor of the fraternity before somebody saw him up there. And and then now they're scrambling and they're trying to get guys to wake them up and come out and meet Coach Wooden and stuff. So there was a real funny story the morning before that picture was taken that I didn't learn about till later that night.
Was there some Bill Walton shenanigans going on? Or what's
probably
going on?
so. Yeah, that was part of the story. There was probably some aroma in that top floor that he might have first encountered when he was coaching Bill Walton.
Jerry, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and a little bit about your family, and who introduced you, or your first memory of the game of basketball.
Well, my first memory, I'm from Martinsville, Indiana, small town, about 30 miles south of Indianapolis and about 18 miles north of Bloomington, where Indiana University is at. And I have a big family on both sides. My mom was one of 8. My dad was one of 11. There were 9 boys in his family. So, my family upbringing was just big family and doing stuff on the weekends with this family or that or whatever. But there's pictures of me. My dad and mom lived in a real small apartment that my grandfather owned. And there's some pictures of me when I was like 2 years old with a basketball outside the apartment. My dad had put up a little backboard and basket. So, and he really didn't play basketball. He quit school early. His family was very poor. But, I don't know what even at that time, motivated him to do that. So then when we moved from there, when I was 3 years old, we moved, and the story was he wanted to live out in the country. He had been brought up in the country, and my mom wanted to stay in town. And so it was back and forth between a house that was on a dead-end street in Martinsville that was surrounded, it's dead-ended where the city park was, and then it surrounded around where my backyard was. They ended up buying that house, and 30 feet tops from our property line in the park was where the city outdoor basketball court was. So I basically grew up on a basketball. That's how I was introduced to basketball. I lived right there, had a full court, double full court just off of my backyard, and everybody in town came there and played all the time, every night in the summer, on the weekends, all day long. And so the park also had a little league baseball field, tennis court, swimming pool. So it was a great place to grow up when you were a kid. There was never anything, never bored at all. I mean, and my parents, my mom, I just stayed outside all day, all summer, and playing one sport or the other, and that's how I got introduced to basketball, really.
When I tell my grandkids that we did stay out till dark or until the street lights came on, they look at me so strange and kind of worry about how I made it so far in life.
Yeah, it was a whole different world back then. I mean, we had bicycles. We would ride all over town all day long. You'd get change by riding through the alleys and finding cans and bottles that you could trade in for a nickel and a dime. I mean, you could basically almost buy another Coke by finding a Coke bottle, sometimes. So we always had change in our pocket. All my buddies, there were quite a few kids my age that lived around my street too. So we just had kind of a group of guys, and we always had pickup games. And then, like I said, Martinsville's not that big a town, so anybody that lived kind of on the side of town where we were at, they were up in the park all day long too. So it was, there was never a problem of getting a group of guys together and playing sports.
And as a youngster, which one was your favorite sport? You won 10 letters in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I liked them all. We basically came home and played, in the fall after school until I started playing organized football. I mean, we just played pickup football games, until I was like in the fourth or fifth grade. Tackle football. There was an empty lot down the street. We'd either play there or we play in the outfield or where the baseball diamond was. And I played baseball all summer. There was two different little league fields in town. One was in the park right behind my house, and that was my first. Well, I take that back. I also was on the swim team because the pool was there, and the YMCA had a swim team, and we swam against all the Indianapolis Ys as well. And my mom really wanted me to learn to swim, and so I'll never forget because I always liked to sleep in when I was a kid. I've always been a late night guy and sleep in my whole life. So I never forget 7:30 in the morning in the summer, no school or whatever, and her pushing me and say, you got to get to this, you got to get to swim practice or swim lessons or whatever it was, like almost every morning. And going over there in that water, no indoor pools in town, and that water being so cold. And by the time you get home, your lips would be completely blue and you'd just be shaking like a fish out of water. So played that. That was I think I was only about 8 years old when I joined the swim team, and you couldn't play Little League baseball till 9 in those days. And now they got T-ball and stuff for kids 4 or 5 years old, obviously. So I had to go over there and I was playing, pick up games with all these guys, but I couldn't play till I got old enough. And so I would go over every night. There was a minor league game, 9 and 10-year-olds. And then that would be followed by what they'd call a major league game with the 11 and 12-year-olds. And I just go over there and watch all the games. I knew all the guys in town. There'd be foul balls hit. You'd run to get them. And, sometimes if they go back in the dark somewhere, you'd act like you didn't know where it went. And so you could get an extra baseball for the next day or something. So all those shenanigans were in play. And, to answer your question, when I was small, until I really started going to a varsity basketball game later in grade school and stuff, I liked them all about the same. And then once I walked into the high school gym and saw Martinsville High School play and the energy and the number of people that came to the game and then all the talk, and I just went nuts on basketball.
And what's your first memory of that? Do you remember the first game that you got to watch Martinsville Artesian
I don't
play?
remember the very first game, but I remember going quite often. I was able to start playing in school when I was a fourth grader. Now, going back to the park again, at the grade school I went to, there was an older gentleman that was the coach, the school team there. And in the summer, he had a job and he would bring balls, tennis racket stuff to the park. The city gave him a job. And so even a tetherball thing, we'd play tetherball over in one spot, but he got to know me. So he knew who I was. And by the time I was in fourth grade, there was an odd number of teams. I think there were 7 grade schools that went into Martinsville High School. And so he decided to make an A team to make the schedule. Everybody would be playing every weekend. So our school was the biggest. We had 4 or 5 classes in 4th grade, so in 5th grade. So, but he made a 5th grade team. All the other schools were comprised of 6th and 5th graders. And so he made a 5th grade team only for our school. And then he came to my room. He said, "You want to play basketball this year?" He goes, "We need another player, and you're definitely good enough to play on the team." So that's how I started playing a little earlier than most of the kids. And that was, and about that time is when I really remember going to quite a few of the varsity games and stuff. But it was an old gym. You mentioned wooden. The gym was built in 24, and it was in the Guinness Book of World Records for a while, because the population of the town was less than 5,000 at that time in the 20s, and it held over 5,000 people. The gym did, and it was the biggest gym in the state, biggest high school gym probably in the country, I'm sure, at that time. And so a guy named Glenn Curtis was the coach, and he had won a state championship or 2 before he came to Martinsville. Then he won 3. Wooden's team went to 3 final games, but they only won 1. I think they won his junior year, and they got beat in a crazy game, I guess, his senior year. But the gym has been named, and it's still standing. It's used more for middle schools now. Old brick building. They gutted it. Unfortunately, I wish they would just renovated the whole thing, put a lot of money, but to make it more multi-purpose, they gutted the inside, took all the wooden bleachers and stuff out, but it's still standing, and they still use it a lot there. But so he was the first. He played in it right when it was built. I played in the second to final year of the building before the new high school was built. So I finished playing my high school basketball in that same gym.
As a youngster, as a 4th grader, let's say, what was going on in the state of Indiana with basketball? Did you have someone that you emulated? Did you have a favorite high school, or did you have a favorite college team? Same way with football, and same way with baseball.
Yeah, so yeah, we all had our favorite pro players, and what I really got hooked on in the mid '60s. I was 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. The Van Arsdale twins that played at Indiana University, and quite a story about my relationship with them too. I got to be really good friends with them. I lived in Phoenix and worked for the Phoenix Suns for a while, and they were out there, so I would call them, have lunch with them once in a while, listen to all their stories. They both played 13 years in the NBA. They were great players. They were all stars. And my dad, actually, he worked for a trucking company in Franklin, Indiana, which was about 18, 20 miles from Martinsville. And the guy that owned the trucking company, he lived just a few houses away from where the Van Arsdales grew up. So my dad, once in a while, he would take me to work on the weekends once in a while, and then he would go and do some stuff around his house. If they were in Florida or whatever, he would mow their yard or take in it. And so I'd be in the car with him, and I always remember when we were driving down the road to his boss's place. That's where the Van Arsdales grew up, right there. So they actually grew up in Greenwood, Indiana, and they went to Manual High School, which, because the Van Arsdale's father was an administrator at Manual High School. And one of the great stories that they told me was when Bobby Plump made the shot for Milan to win, their dad was working as a game official at Butler and so they said, we didn't have seats. He told us, he set us over on the corner. It's an elevated floor back in those days, just like it is now. He said, we were sitting over on the side of the court, and they said they've looked at films and stuff, and they never had a good angle to where they could see themselves, sitting there on the court, but they both just sat there on the court and watched that game. So they would have been probably, about 12 or 13 years old, I think, when that game happened. So, but I love them. Then as soon as they graduated, then Rick Mount and Billy Keller and those guys came into Purdue, and I jumped over on the Purdue bandwagon pretty fast watching those guys. And so I just grew up, just loving Indiana college basketball as well as high school basketball at a young age.
And what was the high school football at that time you were there? Was it the cluster system? What I mean, it was some kind of jacked off playoff situation, right? Jacked up.
Yeah, when I played high school football, my junior year, I ended up starting. I got hurt in junior high. I had a really bad concussion in eighth grade, so I didn't go out my freshman year. Um, Coach Alford came in that year to Martinsville High School, Sam Alford, and my mom and dad, they were really leery about me playing football after that concussion because it was a pretty good one. And so I played on the tennis team my freshman year, just to do a sport. I did not want to run cross country. I always thought running that far is for horses or for a car or something. I didn't want to run 5 and 6 miles a day. So I played tennis. They encourage at a school like Martinsville. They encourage you to play more sports back then. There wasn't a ton of athletes, even though we had a lot of students. A lot of them were just that were farmers and country kids and stuff that didn't play a lot of sports. Some of them did, but some of them didn't. So back to football, I didn't play my freshman year, and that year we had a new football coach. I think it was his second year. Martinsville went 9-1, and they hardly had ever had a winning season in the history of the school. Martinsville football was basically non-existent. So when that happened, the whole town just went crazy. They played Bloomington High School at the time, and Bloomington was in the middle of a 60-game winning streak. They had by the time I was a junior, the streak was still going on. They had the longest winning streak in the country, and just a great football program down there. So I kind of got football fever again watching that, and, just wanted to be a part of all that. So I was in Coach Sadowitz's phys ed class. So he took that opportunity my freshman year to be in my ear all the time, talking about, he saw me throw the football at gym class and the other stuff I could do. And so he said, no, well, you'll come out. He goes, you played running back, you played a little quarterback in junior high. He goes, I'm going to make you a quarterback. You won't get hit in practice that way. You won't get hurt. And, he just kept every day it was something else. So finally, I tell my parents I want to play football, and my mom is like, no, no. And but the other thing that happened that year was my freshman year, I fell and I cracked a couple of teeth playing basketball. So then I finally got to I said, I didn't even get hurt. I wouldn't get hurt in football. I'm going to have a mask on and all this stuff. I said, I got hurt in basketball last year. So you can get hurt in any sport. So they finally gave in. So my sophomore year, I mean, I was like a prima donna. I didn't get hit in practice. I wasn't playing, and I know some of the other older guys on the team are kind of rolling their eyes at that situation. But I did all the other drills. I did all the stuff. But the guy that had to go against the first string defense, they called him the scab quarterback because he was always getting creamed every play. I never had to do that. So I finally started playing my junior year, and we were okay. We were like 6-3. Well, my sophomore year that I didn't play, they went 9-1 again. They had a really good quarterback, guy named Randy Wells that I learned under, and he played football and he played all three sports over at DePaul in Greencastle, and he was a really good athlete. And so then my junior year, I started. My arm still wasn't quite as strong as what I got to my senior year, but we had a good team. And then my senior year, we ended up beating Bloomington for the first time in the history of the school. The year before, they had lost their final game to Cathedral, I think it was. And that was my junior year was the first year Indiana, the cluster that you were talking about. They tried the football championship. They had 3 classes. They had the state divided in 4 regions, and the top team in each region undefeated. And then the tiebreakers, because there's going to be more than one undefeated team probably in those 3 classes in each thing. We were in the South Central Conference, and we had to play 2 teams that were AA schools. Indianapolis, Washington went undefeated, and we were in their district. They went undefeated, and they played all 3A teams. So we didn't get in, and Washington was in the state finals. So I don't know how we would have done. We had a really good team. We had 4 or 5 D1 players on our football team. So, but unfortunately, and that's what sports does. You get situations like that where you get messed over. Same thing happened my senior year at Purdue. We win the Big Ten. We don't get in the NCAA tournament. So those kind of things, they really help you deal with unfairness and stuff like that later in life, because it's always happening in everything. So
when do you get on the radar? When does Coach Alford show up at Martinsville? What's your first interaction with him? And tell us about getting into the high school basketball game.
Well, Coach came my freshman year. He was there 4 years, my 4 years, and then he went to Newcastle after my senior year. But he came my freshman year. Got to know him probably, more when school started. I think I did have some interaction with him when he first got in town. He probably got in town mid to early summer, and he reached out to a lot of guys. So he'd seen me play a little bit at the city park. He would ride his motorcycle up to the city park and watch pickup games a lot and stuff, just to see what was going on, who was playing all the time and stuff like that. But what happened that year when that was the year Martinsville had a really good football team my freshman year. So he's in there, going to be varsity coach. But the basketball program, we had 2 juniors and a couple seniors that weren't very good. He kept them because they worked really hard. Then he cut some of the other guys because he's just wanted. We had a good sophomore class that year, and my class, freshman class, was pretty good for our levels. But we had he started bringing the sophomores and the freshmen up, kind of early on. And I didn't play in a varsity game till maybe late December. And I was small. I mean, I was like 5'9", 130 pounds, maybe my freshman year. I was skilled, but Martinsville was in a really good conference, South Central Conference. And there was a book that was put out at the end of the year. There used to be a little handbook about the size of your hand, and it gave all the stats. You've probably seen them before. It gives all the stats, all the conference standings, rated the schedules. Our schedule that year was rated like the 5th best in the state. So we went like 5-15. I mean, we took some lickings. We were playing Terre Haute North with Howard Sharp, with these big guys over there. We played Richmond, Indiana, which was a big, powerful football school, and had 2 or 3 Indiana All-Stars on their team. Who else did we play non-conference? Jennings County, I think we played them. They had 2 guys that went to Louisville that year, a smaller school in the southern part of the state. And then our conference, while I was in school, was at least as good, maybe better than the North Central Conference in those years. My freshman year, Connorsville won the state. We played them to a 6-point game at our place. I remember that. Jeffersonville had an unbelievable program. They went to the state my junior year. Walter Jordan's team beat Wayne Walls and those guys. That was my junior year. Franklin went to the state. They had the McLaughlin twins, John McLaughlin's nephews, that went to Butler. And then who else went to the state? Columbus beat us my senior year in the regional. We had beaten them 3 straight times in the last 2 years, and they were all close games. They were really good, and they beat us, and then they went to the state. So we had
Coach Bill Sturman, right?
Yeah, Bill Sturman was the coach here, and one of the Welmers, the older Welmer that was a referee for years and years and decades. His youngest brother, his youngest brother was playing. He was my age, and so he was like 6'9". And their front line went like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", and they were a lot bigger than us. And they played a tight zone, and they beat us in the regional.
So, what was high school basketball like with Coach Alford?
It was tough at first because he was a taskmaster. We weren't winning. He wasn't happy with them. But the reason we got successful my last couple of years was he just had a passion for basketball. He knew how to coach it. He was demanding. I mean, we probably ran as much lines up and down the court as we did play basketball that first year. So he would grab the ball. Somebody wasn't doing something right and just kick it as hard as he can. And our gym was big, like I said, so it would go way up in the top of the gym, and everybody was on the line running sprints while the ball was bouncing all the way back down to the court. But he really knew how to pull the trigger on every guy. He knew every guy was a little bit different, and he just got us to play really, really hard. He was a big disciple of Knight, so he wanted to kind of base our program on IU. We got striped pants. They weren't just red and, the red and white candy stripe, but it was red, white, and blue and a little bit different. But so he wanted that. He kind of, based some of the stuff off that. There wasn't much money in the programs and stuff then. I remember towards the end of practice, he always thought it was a big deal and a big treat for us if we got some free Gatorade at the end. So otherwise, he had these big mixing things, and the manager would be down there mixing it and stuff, and he wouldn't give that to us free. We had to pay like a dime or 15 cents for a cup of Gatorade after practice. So the stuff, we just laugh about it now, like, what? We were paying for our own Gatorade in high school, but just little stuff like that. He his son, was about 7 or 8 years old in those days, so he was like the team mascot. So he would get on the team bus. He went everywhere with us. He looked like a golfer because Steve always wore like a white belt with his long pants and his tennis shoes and his shirt and stuff. And when we lost, he would be more mad, and he'd be almost in tears and so mad after the games if we lost, like especially my first couple of years. And it was just funny being around him. So we had a character that on our team that was he was the other guard besides me, and he was an instigator in the games. I mean, he tried to pick fights, and it was pretty what we had several fights in our games. You watch the movie Hoosiers and that stuff happened back then, and nobody else would really know it. I'm sure the ISH AA got wind of some of that stuff, but nobody ever got suspended or anything. Fans came out on the court a few times in our games. It was a lot different than it is now. I mean, and some of the fans would go to road games or even the home games, and the mantra was, well, if we don't win the game, we're going to win the fight. So it was rough. I mean, all those towns were like that too. It was a different era, but it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. In our conference, like I said again, they were all good. I mean, not everybody was the same, but in those 4 years that I was in school, like I said, Connersville was really good for a while. Then Jeffersonville was always good. Seymour beat us my freshman year. We had to go down to their place, and they had really good in the early 70s, and this was like the tail end of that run that they had. And we go down to their gym, is about 6,500 or 7,000 packed. They beat us 112-56. That's a worst loss I've ever had on a basketball court. They doubled the score on us, and so it was just a lot of good memories.
In your junior or senior year in high school, you're sitting there. What did you picture yourself doing? Where did you want to go to school? Where did your offers first start coming from? Tell us about that. Getting to be a Purdue Boilermaker. And by the way, the person who was running the Indianapolis Washington football team was also a Purdue Boilermaker grad too. I think Coach Bob Springer, right, at Washington High School.
Yeah, and Bob Springer, and he coached George McGinnis, who would be a future teammate of mine. And Bob ended up moving down to when he retired. He moved down to Foxcliff, which is a residential area with a golf course just north of Martinsville, about kind of like a suburb, I guess you'd call it now. But he moved down there. So yeah, that he was the coach of that team. That at Washington. What was your question again on?
Sorry about that. No, so you're a junior or senior in high school. Yeah, the process of you becoming a Boilermaker. How does that happen?
Yeah, that was a slow kind of thing. I'll give you the gist of it. Coach Offer really wanted me to go to Indiana. He was a big Knight guy. Knight was recruiting me. Knight came to my house. And then I don't know, I've heard different stories. And I've even had Mike Krzyzewski was he was a grad assistant for Knight my senior year. And so, I actually worked, he did USA basketball and coached the USA team, Mike Krzyzewski. And so I volunteered to work with the select team one year. It's about 10 or 12 years ago. And so Mike is there. The select team are the younger guys coming up to be in the Olympic program. So they do it in Vegas for about 4 or 5 days. And so I'm one of 4 coaches that are out there helping with that. And so we had dinner a couple nights. And one night I'm sitting by him. Dave Cowens was one of the other, and the two of us are sitting by Krzyzewski. And Mike started talking to me. He said, when you were at Martinsville, he said, all the assistant coaches were telling Knight that you were the best player. Number one, he said, we all wanted to be the guy that came to watch you play on the weekend because you were so close to Bloomington. We'd have to drive 2 or 3 hours and then back. He said, so we were all fighting over who would go and watch your games. He said, but he goes, Knight got it on this kid from Illinois named Bob Bender, and he thought you guys were almost the same. And I think he might have been at the last game we lost at Columbus North. I've never really verified that, but somebody said they saw him there. He would kind of go in with a hat on and sometimes glasses so people wouldn't know, but most people knew who he was. But anyway, I didn't play particularly great in that last game. And so I go and play after the season's over. I go down. This was 75. This was the year that Scott May broke his wrist. So I go down and watch them practice. They're getting ready to go play Kentucky, and that's the last time I was talked tonight or was in the gym. I go and play in some all-star tournament in Pennsylvania after that. And so Alford was out there. My parents were out there in Pennsylvania, and Alford came to my room. He said, IU doesn't have a scholarship. He goes, they gave it to this Bender kid. And I go, really? And I go, and that's when, I told you that I might have had some other opportunity, but I still had other schools that I was talking to. So I ended up visiting Cincinnati. Cincinnati called me up and they said, we stopped sending you letters because I was told, they said, we were told you already knew where you were going and you're committed and everything. I said, well, I didn't, obviously. But it came down between Purdue and Louisville. I visited Alabama. I visited Cincinnati. And the last 2 schools were Purdue and Louisville. Louisville recruited me hard my last 2 years. And that it was a hard choice. But I wanted to play in the Big Ten. And one of the tipping point things that happened was Alford came to me. He said, well, Knight says he thinks you should go to Miami of Ohio. I go, Miami of Ohio? Why? He goes, he just thinks you'd be, and I go, he wants me to go to Miami of Ohio so he doesn't have to play against me. I said, that's why he wants me to go there. So I went to Purdue. So, I really was leaning towards Louisville, but when I made my visit there, it was like a weekend, and they might have not had classes for a couple of days before. I didn't really get to meet any of the players. But I like Denny Crum. I like the assistant coach, Bill Olson, that ended up being the AD there at Louisville for a long time. He was really the one recruiting me. And when I went down there to the games at Freedom Hall, he would bring you right into the locker room before the games. There was me and maybe one other recruit. And so you got to go in there and set, and stuff. But I didn't really get to interact with the players much because it was right before the game. But you got to see the whole thing on how they did it. And, and I always liked the town of Louisville, and it wasn't going to be too far. But, like I said, but with the other thing, I really, in my mind, wanted to play in the Big Ten. So in the end, that won out.
And what a great time to play in the Big Ten.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
if you go back, somebody should do, I should do it, I guess. But if you go back and go through the rosters from 75 to like 80 and pick out the guys that played in the NBA, then add up the years that they played in the NBA. There's no way any other conference had that many pros in that short of time and played that many years. It's just, I played against NBA point guard, and like 8 of the 10 teams had NBA point guards. And so that's kind of what I kind of felt, because even when I was in college, I swear, even up into my senior year, I didn't have really any thoughts of playing in the NBA. I really didn't think I was good enough, or didn't know. I played against a couple pros in the summer and stuff here and there. But once these guys started getting drafted high and started going, I said, well, I gotta I do okay against those guys. I got a chance if I get on the right team or something like that. But the Big Ten was just crazy. The number one pick of the draft, Michael Thompson was when I was in school. Kent Benson, Joe Barry Carroll I played with, Magic Johnson, obviously. I mean, those guys was right in the best players were, and a lot of great players. Herb Williams, Clark Kellogg, Kevin McHale, you can go on and on. Ricky Green, Greg Kelser, all those guys at IU. They had a bunch of pros at IU, obviously. Ohio State, Kelvin Ramsey, Herb Williams, Clark Kellogg. I mean, they're just pros everywhere. Ronnie Lester at Iowa, even the two guards at Wisconsin and Northwestern, which are probably the two worst programs where I was in there, with Wes Matthews played quite a while, and Billy McKinney for Northwestern played quite a while. They all had pro point guards all over the conference. And then I played, when I was at Purdue, my first year, Kyle Macy went to Purdue. He played in the NBA. Bruce Parkinson and Eugene Parker were older than me. They were both borderline NBA players. They both got drafted. And so, it was there was a lot of good players.
And is that why you think Macy left? Is because of how point guard laden your Boilermakers were, or?
Yeah, here's what happened. My freshman year, Bruce Parkinson was a senior. He broke his wrist in like the second or third game. So he redshirted and was coming back. And so we still had three, Macy, Parker, and myself. And Kyle's dad was his high school coach, and Bob Macy, a great guy, good coach. And so towards the end of the year, the writing was on the wall that all four of us were going to come back. Well, I was kind of the short stick in the playing time that year. And so I was telling my parents, I said, I don't know where to go. I said, but I'm not going to play much this year again. I said, I know I can play on a lot of other teams. And so for a few days early in the summer while I was that happened. But let me go back. At the end of the year, Kyle Macy's dad talked to my dad, and he said, somebody's reaching out to Kyle. I mean, he said, somebody's reaching out to Kyle from the SEC. He didn't mention the school. And he said, they like your kid too. He said, they like Jerry too. Like we could go in a package deal somewhere. So my dad, he mentioned that, to me, and I go, I thought it was Tennessee, because Tennessee did recruit me. Kentucky really didn't recruit me. So then in that summer was over, the season was over, and I'm home, I'm working in the summer. So then I heard that Kyle was leaving. I said, well, I'm not leaving now. I'm going to stay, because I just didn't want to go through the transition of, I like most of the guys on the team. I didn't like sitting on the bench, and I did play every game, but and I got in the 3-guard rotation again the next year, and I was usually the odd man out. I didn't start, but we did play a lot more 3-guard my junior year than we did my freshman year. So it worked out. It worked out okay.
And of course, you played with Larry later on in your career. What was it like playing against Larry? And could you believe what you saw? Did you know what was going to happen?
Well, I got a couple of Larry stories, but way before that, even when I was on the All-Star team, we would play a game in Mitchell, Indiana, on the way down to Louisville to play the Kentucky All-Stars. And there was a black gentleman down there named Monk Clemens. That was his nickname, believe it or not, in Southern Indiana. But he was a great guy, and I would go down and he would call me up, and I would go down and play in the game against the Indiana All-Stars a couple of times down there, because I liked him so much, and it was fun. It was a little cracker box gym, kind of built in the same era that Martinsville's was, brick on the outside and everything. So we play this team. This is the first time I'd ever been on the court, Bert. We play this team called the Hamilton Construction or something like that. And I think Clemens had something to do. I think he sponsored that team as well. And so when Bird quit IU and he went back down to French Lick, and he just worked for the city or something that whole year, there was Indiana State was first on the list trying to get him, I think, even then, because they saw him play in a couple of those games. So he shows up, walks in this gym. We're already out there warming up in the lines, or out there. Maybe we were just shooting around before we did the actual warm up. So I see him walk in, he's got the hair, the Beatle haircut down to his eyebrows and all this stuff, looking funny back then. And he walks in, and he had work clothes on. He'd been baling hay all day. He'd been baling hay for probably 7, 8 hours or whatever it was, and hard work. He comes out there and gets 39 points. There's articles in the Indiana Hall of Fame magazine about this whole game, but I was right there watching it. He gets 39 points. They had Mike Flynn was on their team, who played in the NBA. I think he might have still been on the Pacers actually then. And then a kid named a guy from Scottsburg named Billy James. And he had a brother, and they called him the James Gang or the James Boys. And they had a real good team at Scottsdale. But anyway, I'd remembered him from playing against Martinsville High School. So they're out there on the court. They beat us. Later that summer, Steve Walker and Sammy Drummer and a couple guys on our all-star team, we go to Lebanon and play. They had an outdoor tournament. They used to have outdoor tournaments all over Indiana. And Bird shows up with some of the guys from Indiana State, and we're playing outside. And there's a play. We're playing on concrete outside. There's a play where there's a loose ball in the lane area, and Bird goes down on the ground and gets it and turns and throws it up and makes the shot outside. And I go, this guy, he's different, So then the next time I played against him was my junior year, and at Indiana State. Our guys were so overconfident going into that game, and they got really good that year, and then the next year they go to the final game, but they beat us like 31 points. I mean, blew us off the court, embarrassed us. And so the next year, Fred Schaus gets fired after that year. And that's probably one of the reasons getting beat 31 by Indiana State. Lee Rose comes in. And so for the whole preseason, we're playing Indiana State in the second game of the year. And the whole preseason, we had to wear these shirts with number 31 on them, because he said that something like that's not going to happen. We're not doing that stuff anymore. They still beat us at home because we played them. We got better as the year went on. I swear to this day that we would have beat them later in the year because we got so much better that year. But those were the first my first encounters with Bird.
And you guys would have made the tournament too if it would have been extended like it is today too.
Yeah,
that was just an incredible year. Just
did it the next year.
Yeah,
and they changed the football playoffs the next year too. When I got out of high school. I'm the reason they changed the rules. But yeah, he was. And then, of course, he's such a character. So when I got on the team, we talk about something. I said, yeah, we should have beat you that game at Mackey Arena. He goes, Mackey Arena? He goes, you played for Purdue? He goes, I don't even remember you. He'd say stuff like that. But we had a guy that guarded him, and the Celtics ended up drafting him the next year. Arnett Hallman, great athlete. If he could have dribbled the ball just a little bit, but he was a great defender, strong, rebounder, offensive rebounder, could jump out of the gym. He guarded Larry that game, and Larry went 6 for 18 from the field. But even in our gym, he got a lot of calls. So he made like 10 free throws. I think he scored 20 or 22 points that game. But Arnett did a heck of a job on him.
How close are you to Larry?
I used to be real close, but we just not that close anymore. The guys on the team that I'm still close with Kevin. I worked for Kevin for a long time. And he lives out in Phoenix. I was in Phoenix for a while before I moved to Florida. And so I still keep in contact with him some, Scott Wedman some. I texted Danny Ainge the other day about something. So we don't talk a lot, most of us that much. But yeah, we got a lot of good memories though.
When you're getting ready to leave Purdue, did you see yourself going in the fourth round? Did you see yourself going higher? Did you have other ideas of what you were going to do in life?
I had no idea. I mean, I went and played in a couple. Here's a couple things I did. After my senior year, I actually talked to Knight on the phone. about they were having the Pan American game tryout. So this would have been 79. The Olympic year was 80. So I get this invite to come to that. And so I actually called him. I go, why am I getting invited to this? I said, you guys aren't going to keep seniors or any guys that are, have a chance to play pro ball because you're ineligible for the Olympics back then. I said, he goes, no, he goes, I'm not going to try to persuade you. He goes, but there's all the NBA scouts are going to be there. So they didn't have a lot of the stuff now, these pre-draft camps and stuff that they back then. He said, every team's going to be, he goes, I thought you might want to get, I go, yeah, I go, that makes sense. I said, I'll come and be there, even though I know I'm not going to make the team or anything. And so there were some other seniors that did exactly what I did because of the scouts. And then there was an agent that I used my first year from Cincinnati. His name was Ron Grinker. And he had a lot of his players and then a lot of his free agents that were borderline NBA guys. And I went down to Cincinnati for a 3-day little camp and played, and a lot of the scouts were there. So going into the draft, though, there wasn't the mock drafts as much and stuff like they do all the time. Now I had no idea, but there were like 10, if not 12 rounds back in those days. I mean, almost everybody that could dribble and chew gum at the same time would go somewhere. And so I had no idea, but I knew I was probably a long shot of making the NBA. Even then, I really wasn't counting on that. I wanted to get into coaching. That's what I was thinking then, was maybe I could, start out somewhere coaching, and, I wanted to be in the game. But then I was working for the Purdue basketball camp, the draft. I knew the draft was that day, but it's not like it is now, So I was over working at the camp all day. And then, I don't know, sometime in the middle afternoon, nobody had cell phones or anything. I'm walking around Mackey Arena maybe after lunch. I was taking some classes in the morning, and then I would work the camp in the afternoon. I had to finish like 2 classes that summer to get my degree. And somebody from the basketball office said, "Hey, we got a phone call. You got drafted." And so that's how I found out. I go, "Who to?" And they said Golden State Warriors. And I was kind of happy with that because I always wanted to go to San Francisco. I'd never been there. I always heard it was a cool town. And the Warriors had won the championship like 3 or 4 years before that. 75, I think they won it. So that's how I found out. And it was a long summer. I went out there, and they wanted to keep me out there to do some publicity stuff and run camps for kids and do that. So I was out there for, I don't know, a month and a half before training camp started that year.
How do you get to the Indiana Pacers?
Well, I didn't make the this is a story, a movie. I mean, my life could be a movie, really. So,
we'll talk about the book later.
I didn't make the Warriors. I go back to Indiana. Team calls me up from the CBA. The CBA had just founded a couple years before that. Maine had my rights. I go out there. I stayed for 2 days. It was a zoo. And I was going to be in Bangor, Maine, and then taking van rides down the East Coast. Most of the teams were on the East Coast then. And I go, I'm going to hate playing basketball. I'm going to hate it. And I don't want to hate, I don't want to hate it. So flew home. My girlfriend, my future wife, I flew back. I got a job with Sporting Goods Company in Indianapolis. I did that for a year, but these guys were great that I worked for. They said, "You still have aspirations?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I think I can. I go, after being out there in training camp, I said, I had a great training camp. I only got to play in 1 game. I said, they had guaranteed contracts. They had some older guys. I said, it was just a bad team for me to get drafted by. They said, well, anytime you want to play in any of these tournaments, they had older AAU adult type tournaments in those days, more than they have now, that were pretty good competitions and stuff. They said, you need to do any of that to take time off, just let us know in advance, blah, blah, blah. And so I did stay in pretty good shape over the winter and stuff. So in the spring, late spring, but it got to the point where I didn't think, I was even going to go out the next year probably. But then my wife hears my girlfriend at the time, my wife hears on the radio, the Pacers getting sold and guys buying it. they're bringing in a new coach, Jack McKinney, that was a Laker coach that had a bike wreck. And so to introduce him, I think what they were doing, they wanted to get publicity, number one. And number two, they wanted to check Jack out, see what his faculties were because of his bad bike wreck, and just get some things going. They were going to have on the radio said, a Walter Mitty camp. And so, tryouts and so if you're interested, call or whatever. So I called Jerry Oliver, who coached McGinnis in high school at Washington. He was Slicks. He was Bobby Leonard's assistant. And so he was still on there, and he was in the front office with Nancy as they were turning this thing over to the new owner. And I called him up, and he was the guy actually running this camp or deciding who was going to be there. He said, "Oh man, you want to come?" He goes, "You're just what we're looking for. Somebody that people know around here." And and I'm thinking, well, this is just a publicity